Yeah. So the I'm gonna say this one more time, right? So you're gonna fill out this thing, diagrams, both sides, okay? You'll be able to find them. They're on your textbook, all right? Just short descriptions on them. Cross out all the on your worksheet, all the descriptions that you would have on this. You just label that on the diagram, okay? And do it that way. So we're still in the brain, and we're still working through that. So guys, tell me how do we look at the brain? How do doctors, how do people look at the brain? What are some techniques that you know of? MRIs, correct. What are other ones? CTs, CAT scans, right? Are there other ones?
Dead bodies.
Okay, so yeah, in the early days, right? So they wanted to observe somebody's brain. What did they do? They sliced and diced, right? That's about all they could do, right? Because they didn't have any way to really find out what was going on up there, right? So, Aiden, so graciously, told me that he would donate his mind for us to slice and dice, and so we could observe his brain. I don't think his mother would be too happy with that, so we'll decline your offer. But thank you so much for offering your brain as tribute for the rest of the class. So anyway, but no, that's what they did, right? Is they, before they could actually image and things like that, right? They do horrific things to people back in the day. Lobotomies and things like that, where they would stick things into people's brains and stuff to help the mentally ill, and they thought it was helping. And y'all know what a lobotomy is, right? Like basically they stick a needle, like into the eye, into the brain. Like they do stuff like that. Okay, like if you actually look up what they used to do for mental health patients, it was horrific. Okay, or they would, they may not be called lobotomy. That I may get that mixed up with something else. But like they electric shock the brain, and just electroshock therapy. I mean, they would be doing some crazy stuff. There's a movie that came out several years ago that kind of showed some of this. It was called Sucker Punch. And it's probably maybe 10 years old, but it showed like they get the needle and they put it down in through the eye into the brain to stimulate areas of the brain to make people better. Okay, anyway, sorry. It creeps me out just thinking about. I couldn't watch that movie because it gave me anxiety. Yeah, go ahead.
So the ones that are already marked out, are those the ones to like do the label on here?
Yeah, there's other ones to label on there that's on the diagram in the book. So you just go to that picture's in the book.
Oh, okay.
And just go to the book, and I cross out the one. So if it's on the book, if it's on the diagram and on the worksheet, don't do it.
But if it's not in the diagram, do not on YouTube. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
There you go. Yes. Okay. Because there's going to be things on that diagram that aren't on the worksheet. So do that though. Okay. All right. So there's CT scans, which are computed topograph. Right. It slices the brain, so you can see slices of the brain. Right. So they can not actually slices, right, but it's images of the slicing of the brain, so they can actually slice through and see actually what's going on in the brain. So they're actually able to catch things better. There is also, we talk what? MRIs. We said MRIs. That's called a magnetic resonating image. Okay, it's a magnetic field, and it goes deeper. Radio pulses are used, and they go through. Right, it allows a computer to create a three-dimensional image of the brain. Right, it also slices, but it creates a three-dimensional image of the brain. All right, and all these are just ways that we can look at the brain now, way researchers look at the brain, rather than having to wait for somebody to die before you can really find out what's wrong with them, okay? And then there's also MEG, right? Magnetic, y'all just read that word because I can't read it, okay? Magnaflopograph. Anyway, you're good with words. Have you read it? You come. Help me out. Magna. Yeah. Yeah, see, she don't even want to read it either. You read it and you're like, yeah.
Type it into Google Translate.
Yeah, so what is called Meg, right? Anyway, it's a helmet-like device, plays on an individual's head, all right? And so it explores different cognitive processes, right? So there's all different ways that they use to just try to help people to find out what's wrong with them, right? Even PET scans, positron emissions tomography, right? And probably the best one we've heard of that is probably whenever somebody's being viewed for cancer, they use a PET scan. But it also can help with functions of the brain. Okay. All right. So let's just look a little bit. We're going to look at this diagram here and kind of look at it just a hair, and look at the other diagram and just talk about it. Okay. So when we look at the brain and we look at what's going on here, we look at the medulla, right? It's located at the top. Yeah, right. Like that's always what I think. I think I go back to Waterboy. Yeah, there's something wrong with that boy's medulla. Oh my god. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, that's what I always think of. Yeah. Anyway, that's the first place I went. So, all right. So right, we look at this, and this is the hindbrain, right? Controls heartbeat, breathing, right? When there's something wrong with a spinal cord patient, typically this is what swells up, and they're not able to function. Okay, because it controls so much. All right, so and so that's at the base of the spinal cord, right? There's also pons, right? And so this relays messages, right? It's kind of the bridge, right? Lower part of the brain, upper part of the brain, right? Crossovers nerves, right? It carries messages from the brain to the body, right? Very important, right? Also influences sleep, dreaming, arousal, all those things. So very important. Okay. We also have the cerebral cortex, controls complex thought and processes, right? We have the cerebellum, right, at the base of the skull, right? It's behind the pons. It's the main part of the brain. It kind of looks like a small brain, right? This part of the lower brain, it controls all involuntary, rapid, fine motor movement, okay? Also voluntary movements that happen in rapid succession, right? It coordinates this, right? When we walk, we skate, we dance, all that stuff. It's coordinated through this, guys. All right, so it also, also when we, movements of speech and playing a musical instrument, all that's controlled through this. Okay, so if something happens here, right, it's going to severely affect what we are able to do. Okay? So we can definitely see as we continue along looking at the biological part of things, right? We can see how if the brain's affected, it can affect feelings, it can affect emotions, it can affect everything that we do. All right. So, all right. I want to move on to the limbic system. The limbic system. Okay, which is the other one. You have to fill in the rest of the stuff. Let me get my other sheet. All right. All right. Here we go. All right. So this is the limbic system. Okay, this includes the thalamus, the hypothalamus, the hippocampus, man, I hate these words. All right, yes, amygdala, and the cingulate cortex. Okay, all right. You can see I could never make it as somebody in the medical field. All right, because I can't pronounce the things. All right. All right. So the thalamus, right, is the inner chamber, right? It's kind of like the structure the incoming sensory information, right? It comes in, right, and sends it to wherever it needs to go, right? It's the sensation, right? The hearing, the sight, touch, and taste, right? Any damage that results in this, they'll have loss of those sensations. Okay, so, right, it's part of the forebrain that relies information to the sensory organs. All right, so it's very important. I would think any part of the brain is important, but if some parts get more damage than others, then it compensates for it. Okay. All right. So the hypothalamus. All right. This is very important. Okay, because it ultimately regulates hormones. Okay. And so if this gets damaged, right, again, physical reason for why something can be wrong with somebody. All right. Regulates body temperature, thirst, right? It's right above the pituitary gland, right? So we learned about that yesterday. Okay. All right. So we talked about Tony said the amygdala, however you say it. All right. All right. Influences emotions, right? Motivation, emotional control, right? Fear response. All right. So, so if something happens to that, right, if something happens to that part of your brain, you might react differently, okay? And so what we might consider a normal response if somebody does something simple to you, for us it might be normal to just simply be okay with something. For somebody that's damaged, they might have a severe reaction to it, like getting really, really angry. Like what me and Tony were talking about in The Water Boy, right? A simple exchange between two people in the show, he way overreacts, and the professor says, "Oh, there's something wrong with this part of this guy's brain." He's talking about this part of this guy's brain, right? And because the guy's getting overly emotional because he says something about his mama. All right, I think is what happens. He says something about his mama, and so he overreacts and goes crazy. He says, "Oh, there must be something wrong with his brain." Okay, but in reality, there are people that this area of their brain isn't functioning correctly, and so it makes them react in ways that we perceive as not normal. But to them, because maybe they've grown up this way, maybe there's been outside influences. However, your theory is, there actually might be a physical reason why that doesn't function correctly. Okay, guys? All right. So the cingulate cortex in the limbic structure, it's found in the cortex, right? And this is for emotional and cognitive processing, right? So, and this is very important, right? Because this is implicated in a variety of different disorders, right? Including attention deficit disorder and hyperactivity disorder. Also, schizophrenia, major depression, bipolar. Okay, so this is where a lot of things happen. Okay, so you can see here that within this, and this is located right here. This is that part right here that I'm talking about. All right, so they see things happening right there when we have problems. When we have problems with ADD, when we have depression disorders or bipolar disorders, right? There's problems going on in that section of the brain. Okay? Now, do they fully understand how all that works? No, right? But because the brain is still, for the most part, undiscovered territory, right? Because they don't have it completely mapped out. But they know that something's going on there. Okay? So we know that there's mapping functions. We know that there are ways that we can look at the brain, right, through EEGs, through PETs, and through MRIs, CT scans, MRI scans, right? We can map the brain. We can see in the brain now, right? But we also need to understand that the structure of the brain can be affected in such a way that that it alters our state. Okay, and we know this, like we've seen this on television, we've seen this in the news, but we have to understand that in and through psychology, right? is that moods and brain injuries can actually affect and change people's personalities. They can change how emotions are processed, how things function, and how things are processed and gone through, right? So, yeah, my phone just went off. Oh no, right? So let's say, for example, somebody who was, let's say they were a year old, right? And they were in a car wreck and they had a brain injury, all right? And they didn't ever fully recover from that. And somebody who lived a normal life. So they may have some brain trauma, and so they may process things differently, right? So through their life, they're having to learn how to filter things through differently so they can be, quote unquote, normal to deal with their emotions in a way that is acceptable through society, through the way that people deal with emotions, okay? Through what's acceptable, right? And because no one person is the same, right? No one person, but we kind of also have these kind of defined rules about how one is supposed to act and how we are supposed to deal with things, right? Not to say that all of them are correct, that's not what I'm saying, but we do have certain protocols and things and how we work through things, right? Like it's not acceptable if you get mad at somebody just to go and kill them, correct? It's not acceptable. It's not really acceptable when you get mad at somebody to cuss them out. It's not really acceptable when somebody says something dumb in class to call them stupid or call them a bitch. Right? It's not acceptable. And it shouldn't be acceptable. Right? And I know that in some classes it is acceptable and it should never be acceptable. Okay? Stuff like that should never happen. But to me, not to me, but scientifically speaking, is when there's trauma to the brain, people function differently. And when they don't get help to understand their trauma, they don't function correctly. And I'm not saying correctly from David's point of view, from Mr. Croy's point of view. I'm just saying they don't function normally from general society's point of view. Like it doesn't, like, to use a term that's kind of crude, their elevator doesn't go all the way to the top sometimes. All right? And I don't mean that just negatively. I'm just saying, like, I don't know how else to describe it. Like, they're just not getting the full picture of what's happening. It's like half the picture's missing. Y'all follow me? You ever had a jigsaw puzzle and you get done with it and you're missing 3 pieces? And you're like, why am I missing 3 pieces? Yeah. Or you're missing a piece, right? It's that type of understanding, right? Some people just, there's something missing there. And so they need to get help. And part of it is a biological reason, right? We see the brain. The brain's a mystery. But if something gets damaged, there has to be some way, some process to work around it. And that's part of psychology, is trying to help people work around those processes of it. If they can't get there to help, one with medicine, then 2, maybe some mental processes to help you, guide you to get to the correct answer. Does that make sense, guys? All right. So get your worksheets, work on them. I'm going to go over another section tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'm going to try my hardest to give you some information on the test. Okay? If not, it will be Friday. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. It will be over the first 2 chapters. Tomorrow, I will do my hardest. If I don't, then I will do my best to put out a video on Friday. Because if I talk about it, I'll record it and put it out. Sound good? Y'all okay with that? Okay. All right. Sounds good. Right. Like I'm trying every time I talk to you guys, I'm trying to record it and just put it on Classroom. So that way y'all have additional information if you want to listen to it again, try to help you through the class. Okay? All right.